Welcome to the Rutgers University Newark SPAA Writing Method Series. This session is going to discuss putting power into your PowerPoint and ePortfolios. PowerPoint presentations should get straight to the point. Keep the slides simple, be concise, and take into account that a single slide can take up to a minute or two to explain. So when you're producing your slides, consider that if you have to make a 10-minute presentation, you may only need 5 to 10 slides. Similarly, if you're not sure how long a slideshow will be and you have several slides, count by 1 minute at a time. You should also paraphrase when you're giving your information because you're speaking specifically to your audience and they'll want to focus on both you and the slides, but they should really be focusing on your voice. Use bullets and numbers where appropriate. Maintain a uniform format throughout the presentation, and try to avoid too much text. Paragraphs, long quotes, long spreadsheets worth of data can be very difficult for a reader to try to comprehend while they're also listening to a presentation. So feel free to break those up. In order to keep your audience's attention, you should make sure that they're focusing on your voice and the major themes that you're establishing in the presentation. The slides are great as visual representations. They're used for notes and other reference points. Make sure when you're in the presentation that you dress appropriately for the occasion. This includes both in-person sessions as well as online ones. Make sure that you speak in a clear and audible voice and maintain eye contact with your audience. Avoid reading directly from the slides where possible. Sometimes it will be inevitable that you'll need to provide us with a definition. Sometimes it will be necessary to provide greater context by specifically putting information into the slides for emphasis. But when you're presenting the information to us, remember that you can deviate from those slides and add additional information that might be fruitful for your audience at the time. Make sure to talk about not just the topic at hand, but also talk about other things within the environmental context to help the audience to understand. And make sure that you speak confidently when you're explaining something that you've done the work with and the research for, so you're providing your expertise before an audience that's attentive. When you're considering your audience, you might want to consider the level that you are speaking at, whether they are your superiors or whether they are your peers. Or maybe perhaps the work that you're about to provide is instructional. If it is instructional, then perhaps you're talking to students or perhaps you're talking to novices. Make sure to make the language presentable and easily understood, and also anticipate questions from your audience. If you're speaking with your colleagues, feel free to use the language that's most common within your field. Feel free to then use acronyms and esoteric information that you might use in memos or you may use in conferences or other types of group settings. But you want to make sure to consider individual roles and the responsibilities of the people that you're speaking with so that you can get the most benefit from your collective expertise. If you're speaking to executives or people who are in positions to make decisions about how money is used or how work will be distributed, then you may want to keep your information straight to the point, short, simple, and provide the results that the executives might be interested in. If you're speaking to a general audience, much like when speaking to students and novices, you should be able to explain your information in a way that will allow the audience to understand the bottom line of what you're saying, and also allow them to inquire, as well as provide a bit more background and detail if they do have questions, which is almost certain to be the case. If you are speaking to children or if you're trying to engage people, if you're trying to be entertaining, then you may want to focus on the more fun aspects of your topic. You may want to focus on things that are going to be engaging for your audience, and that gets to a lot of different types of movement and design decisions. Make sure that once you've put your presentation together, you practice it. Use slideshow and bring notes to your presentations. You can practice by creating outlines, printing the slides, using note cards, And if they are electronic, if you happen to be presenting in a Zoom call or a WebEx call, something along those lines, then you may want to have another type of document at hand and ready to be shared on screen. Uh, if you are in person, consider whether you'll be sitting or standing and whether you're speaking to a small room or an auditorium. When you're creating your slides, particularly when it comes to design decisions, consider if the room will be light or dark so that there's no issues with visibility. And if you are using one of the online spaces to present, make sure that you're comfortable with those online spaces before you do so. There's multiple things you can do to make your slides more interesting, and there's features across Microsoft Office Suite, for example, that work together. This typically is true for different types of platforms, but in the case of Microsoft Office Suite, one of the things that you have access to, whether you're in Word, Excel, or PowerPoint, is Smart Art, which can provide you with the ability to create charts and graphs, different types of tables, as well as develop different types of design backgrounds that will be visually interesting to us. Further, if you're using one platform within this ecosystem, then you'll also often note that it might be better to provide us in a PowerPoint presentation, for example, with information that you found in Excel or with information that you curated in Word. Make them in their native platforms because it is easier to use all of the tools before you bring them into the slides, but it can make things very cohesive and very easy to do should you take that route. Be careful when you're switching between platforms. So for example, if you happen to be using Google Docs or another type of online service that provides word processing, for example, or provides the ability to make presentations, just make sure that they're compatible when you're transferring things over. And if you do transfer things over, always make sure to edit at the end in case there's any small mistakes involving formatting or presentation. Once you're prepared, you can also try to see how things are progressing by showing slideshows and then attempting to actually present for practice. There's a lot of different ways to present. The current presentation is simple in its format, for example. It's universal to the Rutgers platform, which is why we use it. But there's different things that you can do to add emphasis. So while we do want slides to be clear and concise in their font choices, you can use different colors, use different font types so long as they're readable, bold your words, italicize your words, use different sizes and other types of transitions for emphasis. You can underline things. And the idea here is that you want to be consistent, whatever types of emphasis you're using, but that emphasis can provide the reader with a great sense of your patterns and organization skills, and it allows the reader to participate more within the presentation because they'll be able to anticipate what's coming. Feel free to also use pictures, and we accept various types of data. For example, you can use data samples that are simplified if you're trying to present to a captive audience or to your superiors. You can then present that same information in graphic form, whether they be bar graphs, line graphs, pie charts, or one of the smart art options that we discussed. Remember that in a PowerPoint presentation, you are the expert, and you should always leave time for questions. There will always be a few, and so you may anticipate them and even ask them yourself. Leave interesting food for thought for your reader. Provide us with interesting ideas and questions, as well as recommendations that you might have, and provoke the discussion that you want to have within your audience by ending in a strong way. If you don't know the answer to one of your audience's questions, remember, don't panic. Explain that further research may be needed, and rather than making up information on the fly, let the audience member know that you will look into it, perhaps address it in a paper, or provide the type of information where the audience member may be able to find more about answers to their questions if you don't have them on hand. When it comes to ePortfolios, this is an exciting new process that's been going throughout the country for almost a decade now. Developing an e-portfolio is a really strong way to express who you are as a student and who you are as a professional. E-portfolios are designed in different ways by each individual person to reflect not just their work, but also their personality and their approach toward their future. This is an example of one SPAA student's e-portfolio. The purpose of an e-portfolio is that it's a one-stop space for all academic and professional work. It's a collective integration of all learning experiences. Those experiences will include the students' work within the core curriculum. It will include the students' work with on-campus groups, as well as off-campus groups and groups within the community. And it will also be reflective of the students' internship experiences or experiences working with different types